So
Those
I want to know about Huawei and Meng Wanzhou. What's going on with her in Canada?
Yeah, so interestingly, talking about popular clickbait, this actually happens to be one of the most watched topics on our YouTube channel. It happens to be Huawei and Meng Wanzhou and what's happening with Canada. So here's a quick update. So for our listeners that may not be as familiar with the story, I'm just going to go through some of the history and then what's happened in the last week. So Meng Wanzhou is the CFO of Huawei, and she was arrested in British Columbia back in December at the request of the United States for violating sanctions against Iran. So that was the charges. After she was arrested and then went to court and posted bail, China responded by arresting two Canadians. One is a
Yes.
former diplomat that is was currently working for a nonprofit group looking at human rights violations in China. So obviously he was on a watch list. And the other one was a specialist in making bridges to, and what I mean by bridges is um, opening relations with North Korea. And he was also working with opening relations in China. And so he was all about bringing people together. So both those people got arrested for, quote, security reasons. And then shortly after those two high profile Canadians were arrested for security reasons, then there was another Canadian who had already been charged and sentenced to 15 years for drug trafficking in
Mm.
China, and he was appealing his 15-year sentence. And bad timing for this guy. China comes in, and instead of keeping the original sentence or lessening it, they sentence him to death. So he's suddenly on death row. And so, of course, Canada does not believe in the death penalty and has had some very strong words for China. And they said, you're using these three Canadians as political ploys, and you're using your power to try to influence Canada to let Meng Wanzhou go. And Canada keeps insisting this has nothing to do with politics, everything to do with the rule of law. And when there is a request for extradition, we have to follow the law. So, anyways, the spat, that's where it is. So, what's happened in the last week? Well, very high profile Chinese diplomats have been threatening Canada.
Oh
And
no.
when I say threatening, I mean this is pretty extreme. And remember, we're pretty polite people up here, and it's
Mm-hmm.
shocking when we get comments like this. So I'm gonna butcher these names, I'm sure of it. But Chunying is the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman. So she speaks for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and she basically called Justin Trudeau a laughing stock and irresponsible. Like she's doing personal attacks on the Prime Minister of Canada.
Oh.
And then on top of that, she says, we're not afraid of Canada. You can only count the number of allies you have on one hand or on two hands. She says you have no more than 10. So she's basically trying to belittle Canada, and we're not afraid of what you're trying to do out there. And so we all sort of read that in the news, and we're like, wow, that's kind of surprising and kind of strong worded just because we arrested somebody who's breaking international sanctions, but okay. Well, then within days of those strong words, the Chinese ambassador to Canada, his name is Liu She. Once again, I'm sure I butchered his name. I apologize for that. He warned, and this has to do with Canada looking at Huawei installing 5G technology in Canada. And we haven't, like the United States or other countries like Australia, said, no, we're investigating it. And he basically said there will be severe repercussions if Canada bans Huawei.
Now, are you talking their 5G network or are you talking
Yes,
their cell phones?
their 5G network. So he
Wow.
basically says if we ban Huawei, then there will be severe repercussions. And this is the ambassador from China to Canada. So this is probably one of the biggest authorities on it, directly threatening without specifics, but it's pretty leering, right?
Mm-hmm.
All for a company. And
Well,
so,
it's just weird to me because Canada has so many people from China in it.
Yes.
I mean, it's really a mosaic, and there's so much of that culture there. It's weird that they're threatening a country with so much of their own people, right?
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up because the very next thing he did is he accused Canada of white supremacy.
Oh.
Yeah, so here we have this cultural mosaic. We tend to be the most open and welcoming country that I know of in the world. Now I'm
Mm.
biased because I live here. And then he calls us white supremacists. So,
Wow.
that's kind of shocking. So a lot of Canadians were taken back by that. Like, what is this guy doing? This is extreme. We're just concerned about some technology. We're investigating it. We haven't banned it. And now you're threatening us if we don't go with your technology. Like, that instantly has turned so many Canadians against Huawei.
Yeah.
People who probably hadn't even heard the name of the company until Meng Wanzhou was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
So then, just last week, I believe it was Friday, 140 former diplomats, scholars, and scientists from around the world threw their support behind Canada and sent an open letter to President Xi Jinping. And they called China's actions with the arrests and with the threats as extremely concerning.
Yeah.
Um, so, anyways, then this morning, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Chunying spoke up again. And she's once again yelling at Canada about abusing the extradition system. She does actually name the United States in this as well. So Canada's been taking the brunt of this. I think China's afraid to name the United States while they're in these trade negotiations. But she did say, as a threat to the United States, she said China will respond to U.S. actions. And that was in regards to a January 30th deadline that the United States has to submit their extradition papers to Canada. So, a lot of news, a lot of saber rattling, and a lot of offended Canadians.
Yeah.
And, Dan, I found it so fascinating to read the comments at the bottom of these news articles on CBC.
Okay.
So what's fascinating about it is, how we talked about bots and
Mm-hmm.
people pretending to be Canadians and posting pro-Russia comments back when the Novichok poisoning was going on, and we've seen similar things even on our own blogs. This is actually the top rated comments on CBC, and so the most liked. And I find this fascinating, and I think China's sabers rattling has pushed them the wrong direction. Quote, I wanted to give Huawei the benefit of the doubt that they are not beholden to the Chinese government. But along comes China today, threatening clear its relation to Huawei. Time to look for another company to deliver 5G. So that was the highest rated comment
Wow.
when the Chinese ambassador was threatening, like, you better choose Huawei and not ban us or else, right? And so it's like, whoa, nobody tells a foreign country what to do or what not to do, right? And so here's another one. Just a few days ago, the Chinese were telling Canada to mind their own business. So this was in relation to the death penalty that was given to a Canadian. And so they're like, mind your own business, Canada. And now they tell us how to run our country by threatening us to use Huawei or else. Wow, just wow. So that one had the highest likes. And then this one, I think, sums it all up. Given all that's happened over the last few months, the probability that I will ever buy anything with a Huawei sticker is exactly 0.0.
Wow. That's pretty low.
That's very low. So it really looks to me like this has backfired on China, right? I mean, before this, Dan, you and I, we were talking all about Huawei. We love their phones, the
I like their
P20.
phones. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
cool.
they're amazing phones. Their 5G technology is top notch. They really are that amazing. But with all this saber rattling and
Hmm.
threatening, any concerns about their ties to the Chinese government and the Chinese government asking them to spy on whoever's using this technology, it has just magnified the concern. It's gone from most people saying, oh, come on, stop being ridiculous. You're being ridiculous. This is a company that's going to act in its best interest for the almighty dollar. Now people are saying, whoa, like this is pretty extreme, to the point where people are saying there's a 0.0% chance that I'm going to buy anything with the Huawei sticker on it. So
crazy.
it's surprising. And Huawei is a big company here in Canada. I personally know somebody who works for them, mostly in the telecom industry and setting up 4G and now in the future 5G. So yeah, what are your thoughts, Dan? Do you think that China's gone too far?
Yes.
Do you think that they've ruined people's opinions in the United States?
Yeah, I think you always catch more bees with honey than vinegar, like I don't know why they were so angry, and that's really not how you win over the West. You got to have a little
No.
more class and style than that.
Yeah, threats. Nobody reacts well to threats. Like,
Oh, okay, sure, we'll go with you
oh,
now.
I'm scared now. I may be a smaller country than you. Actually, geographically, we're larger.
We're bigger.
but